So today, what we're actually going to be doing is a super quick dish that my mom used to make. It's also, Monday is actually the 10-year anniversary of my mom being gone. So all came together, and I was like, you know what? I'd like to make something that my mom used to make, and it actually turns into like 3 separate dishes. Super easy to prepare. You can totally buy it at the store. It's literally 2 ingredients, and then it's just like either rice or bread. So let's get started. So this is not gyudon. This is not Yoshinoya style beef bowl. I will do that at a different day because that's a completely different recipe. This is actually yakiniku, which is fried meat, is literally the translation, but it's kind of like the Japanese version of bulgogi. You know, it's a kind of sweet soy-based marinade, but you don't even really need to use it as a marinade. You can actually like cook directly on the stove with it without waiting, which is like the best part. So the cool part for my mom, you know, because she was like a busy housewife and she was also like trying to run a business with my dad, she would make things in bulk that then gets turned into bento box products, right? Like lunches for the next day. And that's what a lot of Japanese bento boxes really are. The reason why there's all these like little things in there that, you know, octopus shaped sausages and egg custards and, you know, little bits of meat and that kind of stuff is because they're actually like leftovers from like all the other things that you've had throughout the week. And then maybe she, you know, mom might make like 1 or 2 extra things that are specific for that day. But usually it's just mostly leftovers, and we have it at room temperature in our little bento boxes the next day at school. So super easy. It's literally sliced beef and this wonderful bottle. So there's different brands. This is Ebara. And I don't know, you know, it's kind of like, I like so-and-so's barbecue sauce, right? Like there's like 18 different kinds of barbecue sauce. So this is similar to that. Ebara was always like the brand that my mom liked to use. This is amakuchi, which literally means sweet mouth. So it's a sweeter taste. It's flavored with grated apples and honey, in addition to like the soy and the sake and all the other yummy flavors that usually go into like almost like a really loose teriyaki sauce. But this has a tendency to be a little bit sweeter because of the apples and the honey. You can actually get a spicier version that has a little bit of like Korean gochujang in it, which is a little too spicy for me. So I tend to stick with like the girly flavor and stick with the sweet tasted yakiniku. So that's literally the only ingredient other than the meat. If you're not able to find this in like your local Asian market, you could kind of make your own, which would be, you know, like what I made like in the past when it comes to like a teriyaki type sauce. So it's soy sauce, mirin, some sort of sweetener, whether it's sugar or artificial sweetener. And then you can kind of doctor it up however you want. You can add, like in my case, I tend to add a lot of ginger. And I'm not doing it with this because this already has ginger and garlic on top of everything else. So yeah, so I have about a tablespoon of oil in my frying pan, in my trusty kondo. And we're gonna get that started. And it's literally gonna be like, you know, super quick because all I'm doing is like frying really thin sliced meat and putting the sauce on top of it and then cooking that down, serving that with rice. So a little bit of information on the beef. I know that in past shows I've done like, oh, you can totally use like whatever shaved beef is local in your local market. You can use like whether shaved beef that you'd use for like Philly cheesesteaks, or like if you can't find like an Asian market in your area. Now, if you do have an Asian market in your area, there are several kinds of sliced beef. Turn this a little bit down. Get a chance to get some cleavage. What I'm using here is shabu-shabu style sliced ribeye. Usually if you go to an Asian market and you go into like the freezer section where they have, or like just a regular butcher section, I guess, you're gonna find Sukiyaki style and Shabu-Shabu style. And Shabu-Shabu is always going to be the thinner sliced version. Shabu-Shabu is still a very thin sliced meat. Sukiyaki is also a very thin sliced meat. It's just a little bit thicker. Because Sukiyaki has to sit in a broth and kind of like cook down. Whereas Shabu-Shabu is meant to take your chopsticks and dip it into like a hot pot. So it's supposed to cook really quickly. So the thinner, the better. For me, that works really well for yakiniku, right? But you can totally use this with thicker cuts of meat. You could use it with ribs if you really wanted to. You could use this as marinade, but I tend to like it the way my mom used to make it, which is thin sliced shabu-shabu style meat, beef, not pork, quickly fried with the sauce on top, and then that becomes like your entree for like your traditional Japanese setup. So let's get started. I'm going to take just a little bit just to get started. You definitely don't want to crowd the pan, you know, because then the meat will just steam rather than fry up. But if you want to see how thin each slice is, it's actually kind of hard to get like one slice off because it's so thin. See what I mean? Like you can actually see through a slice. It's really, really thin, which is great because it's easy to digest. You don't have to chew so much. And when you're talking about like old school Japanese cuisine, there was not a lot of beef. There's not a lot of beef in Japanese cooking because for the longest time, the Buddhist monks prohibited you from having beef. And so when they started introducing beef, it really became this thing where you just have a little bit that flavors the dish. And that's why you never really see like really thick cut steaks in Japan, unless you go to like a legitimate like steak house, but you don't really see a lot of steaky steak places. At least not the kind that you see here in the States. Like, you know, you never go to a place in Japan unless they were going with like an American theme, and find like a giant like tomahawk steak, right? That's definitely not a Japanese thing. Yeah, it's so thin that like you kind of have to break it up once it's in the pan. And I'm just going to go ahead and cook all of this down because then I have leftovers. And I know I've said in the past that I'm not a big leftover person, but this is like mom's cooking, you know, so and it's so versatile because it's really just like flavored sliced beef. So it's gonna take a minute because I have to like peel off all these little layers. You know, this beef is actually really, really, really good for Philly cheesesteaks. Like if you are kind of, you know, tired of like, you know, the steakums, like the frozen sliced beef, and you want something that is a little bit more like, you know, fresh, but you can't find, like your local butcher won't slice the beef this thin for you, then the alternate is to just go to your Asian market and see if, like Korean markets have it, because a lot of Korean restaurants do not just Korean barbecue, but they do like a shabu-shabu kind of thing. So a lot, like the Korean market here actually does sell shabu-shabu style sliced beef. So. when the weather gets cool again, I'll definitely show you how to do this as a proper hot pot. The proper shabu-shabu rather than using this for yakiniku. But you know, this is sliced round, like beef round, so it's fairly lean. There's a little bit of fat on it, but not much. A lot of the tenderness from this cut of meat comes from the fact that it's been sliced so thin. So now there's also, those of you who've been to like a shabu-shabu restaurant probably know this, right? But there's beef shabu-shabu, but there's also like pork. And we actually do a really fun like summer shabu-shabu with pork. So, you know, I might do that here. I think that might be fun. Okay, so that's almost there. My last batch goes in. I'm gonna be a little quiet so you can enjoy the sound of meat sizzling. See, these are slicing off. They're peeling off better. These are behaving. And honestly, we use, you know, this shabu-shabu sliced meat or sukiyaki sliced meat for like a bunch of different dishes. You already saw me make it with that konnyaku noodle the other time. So you'll see this cut of meat make a lot of appearances on my feed because it's a good go-to beef sliced goodness. And just that one, you know, tablespoon of oil, just regular canola oil or vegetable oil. Don't use like an olive oil or anything for this. And I'm just gonna let this cook down some more. Get some brown crispy bits. And I'm going to turn the heat right down to a simmer. We don't want to burn the meat. But we've got some nice little charred bits. Those of you who are meat cooking people know that that's the good stuff. That's the stuff that, like, if you add red wine, you know, it makes like a really nice Italian type gravy sauce. If you do it with this, it makes the it adds a little bit like extra beefy flavor, a little bit of extra umami, you know, to the sauce. So the sauce is super watery because it's meant to cook down. And I don't usually ever use the whole bottle for anything, which is why I can do like 2 or 3 meals or cooking sessions, because I can already get like 3 separate meals out of this. You'll see that in a minute. But I'd assume that most Asian cultures have these, but they're long chopsticks that are like connected with a thread. And most markets you can go and get like a 3-pack, and it's like each one is like longer than the other. This is the shortest version. It's still longer than a traditional chopstick, but it's meant just to cook with. And then like the extra long ones I use for like when I'm making tempura or something that's deep fried, because I need the extra distance. Let me adjust this again. It smells so good. Now, like I was saying, you can make your own kind of yakiniku sauce, but I found that, you know, like the commercially made bottles of stuff have been around for, you know, in Japan, I mean, these companies have been around for like hundreds of years, and they make stuff that has been popular for hundreds of years. And who am I to mess with that, right? Like if I owned a restaurant, I probably would go a little bit more nuts with like, you know, original recipe. But see how it's still got a little bit of liquid on the bottom? I'm gonna keep cooking that. Now you have a choice. You can, if you're gonna do a bowl, which is what we're gonna do first, and make like a yakiniku bowl, you can leave some of this liquid looser, because then you can put that right on top of the rice, right? But in my case, because I have extra things I want to do for tomorrow's bento, I really don't want it to be super soupy. super soupy, okay. Because then you put it in the bento box, and then you know, one little tilt of a bento box and you have like juices flying around. So most of the liquid has turned into like a gravy. This is the perfect time to go ahead and just turn off your stove. Make sure that it's off instead of just on a simmer, because this thing is portable. You don't want to like tip over or something. And as you can see, I already had, I was already kind of here. So I used like half a bottle for about 3 meals worth. Good stuff. And you'll find that most Japanese food is made for, you know, quick preparation like this, because we tend not to, you know, we don't do like huge family dinners, and we don't have giant families with and do like casseroles. Like, you know, Thanksgiving is really not, it's not a Japanese thing. So we tend to kind of make meals for a small group of people. Most Japanese families have 1, maybe 2 kids. It's not known to be a big family culture. So yeah. And then even when you're older, you tend not to cook at home and entertain at home. You tend to go out to eat. So a lot of the dishes are made for 1, which is perfect for me, but it's not so perfect living in this country, because a lot of places aren't set up to go out and eat just by yourself. So, so that's basically our base. Okay, I'll be right back. I'm gonna bring over like a traditional Japanese dinner setup, and I'll show you the 3 different ways that my mom makes this into 3 separate meals for her kids. Okay, so we're back, and so this will be what she would make for dinner the night before our need for bento boxes the next day. So she wouldn't have, you know, the frying pan out on the table. This is just for the show, but and so now we have our traditional kind of like small, you know, dinner for 1. So this is what it ends up looking like. So we have our bowl of rice, we have miso soup, we have our yakiniku, and because yakiniku is just, you know, there's no, like for gyudon, like the Yoshinoya style, you would have like sliced onions, and you probably have like some pickled ginger, so there's a little bit of fiber going on in there. But because there isn't in this setup, you get your fiber from the miso soup, which actually has a lot of fiber in it because of the soybeans. And in my case, I also have some seaweed in there, so that's additional goodness. There is hakusai, which is a one night pickle, like a, you know, a lot of pickles kind of taste the same because all you're doing is like taking vegetables and salt and then just kind of compressing them overnight. So this is napa cabbage, but this is yuzu flavored napa cabbage pickle. And that's my extra fiber for the evening. This is something that is particular to Japanese cuisine, but if you are uncomfortable using raw eggs, or you're not in a place where you can actually get fresh farm eggs that are clean, some places will actually sell pasteurized eggs, which are amazing to like kind of ward off like things like salmonella. But in Japan, and like, you know, places like farmers markets, you can actually get eggs that are healthy and safe to eat raw. But if you're the kind of guy that doesn't like raw eggs because you just weren't raised around that kind of culture, use a poached egg, you know, like that's totally fine. So. Ooh, I think that was a double yolk. Amazing. Okay, and they cracked. How you would do this is kind of, you know, itadakimasu, which is how we say grace, because we're not necessarily a Christian country. So we just say itadakimasu, which is we receive these, you know, it's like, I guess it's very similar no matter what culture you're in. You're kind of thanking, you know, the gods for a bounty. So itadakimasu means I'm receiving. So this yakiniku smells so good. And you can almost use it like as a wrap. Get some rice in there. There's like tastes of home, you know? And you just miss, and I'm so grateful. I was gonna say glad and grateful and came out grad. I'm so grateful that there are Asian markets, because there's a lot of stuff that I miss from back home that I can't get here anyway. So the few things that are available here actually make me super happy. Take some of this pickle, which I love. I'll teach you how to make this at a later date. I don't know if you can hear me crunching. Oh, so good. And then what you can do with the egg yolk, and why the egg yolk is there, is it adds this like extra creamy, proteiny, fatty flavor to your beef. So you can dip it right into the egg yolk, or you can kind of scramble that and have it be a little less yolk. So good. Okay, some little miso soup in here. And that's your yakiniku dinner, right? Excuse me, at home. Super filling, super healthy, low fat, nothing's fried, but it tastes bomb diggity. If you like bulgogi, you will enjoy yakiniku, right? Okay, so that's dinner, right? And once you've had dinner and the kids are off, either, you know, taking their bath before bed or whatever, mom would then turn this into a bento box. So let me move a lot of this stuff out of the way. And bento boxes come in compartments. Either it's a big kind of rectangle with like little compartments for your meats and your veggies and like your little desserty things, and then like your rice, or it's layered like this. And if it's layered, usually the bottom layer is rice. And it usually either has an umeboshi, like a salted plum, or it has goma shio, which is sesame and salt. Goma is sesame, shio is salt. So goma shio, like literal translation, sesame salt. So they take roasted sesame and some sea salt, And that just literally gets sprinkled on top. You can also buy things like furikake, which is basically an elevated version of gomashio, which is sesame seeds, sea salt. It has like seaweed flakes, or has like dried bonito flakes in it, or has like dried egg pieces in it. For every whim that you might have for like furikake, which literally means sprinkle on top, there is a flavor for you that you'll like if you like Asian flavors. So that's our first layer, and then second layer gets our yakiniku. And then you can actually use the remaining space. In my case, I'll probably put a chunk of this pickled napa cabbage in here. But keeping it separate from the rice is always a good idea. And this is where, you know, housewives get real creative. They'll, you know, cut carrots into cherry blossom shapes, or, you know, they'll get those like little red sausages and like cut it so it looks like little octopus when you fry them. Or you'll put like a tamagoyaki egg roll in here. But that's literally it. Let me wipe this off. This gets the lid treatment. And that's what we take to lunch the next day. We tend to eat our bento boxes at room temperature. It's neither cold nor hot. If you keep it in the fridge overnight and then you take it to work the next day, then by the time lunch rolls around, it's kind of back to room temp. Some people will pop it in the microwave for like 10-15 seconds just to kind of warm it up, just to kind of warm up the rice more than like the entree stuff usually, but this will go right in the fridge. And I'm going to now show you the last thing, which was the thing that like my mom made. Every once in a while she'll make stuff that really kind of appeals to both my dad's side, which is like the white side, as well as like her traditional Japanese stuff. So there's a lot of foods that she's made that's like variations on Japanese cooking that might appeal to more of a Western palate. And it's so funny because so many restaurants kind of make these dishes. Like she used to make iced coffee, and iced coffee was something that like white people, I don't want to say white people, but like my dad's side of the family in the 70s and 80s couldn't understand why my mom liked iced coffee with like leftover coffee from the night before from the percolator so much. Now everybody goes to a Starbucks, right? Who knew? My mom could have actually started like an iced coffee empire. But in Japan, we've enjoyed iced coffee for like decades, right? So she was just bringing her culture over and hoping that people liked it. And my dad's side of the family didn't kind of understand it, but like these days they're like, oh, remember when, you know? So bento box, that's gonna go in the fridge, and then I'm gonna show you the one last thing that my mom used to make. So this is Japanese milk bread. I buy it because there's a bunch of Asian bakeries in Las Vegas now. It's just, Vegas has kind of exploded in terms of like Asian cuisine. We have a Chinatown, but there's been a huge takeover of a lot of Japanese chefs moving over from either LA or from Japan itself. And we also have a very large Korean population. So in addition to like the Vietnamese and the Thai and all of these other amazing Asian cuisines, we also have a very big presence that's Chinese and a really decent population that's Japanese and Korean. And that means there's, again, certain things that I can finally buy that I missed from back home. And I can't buy, and I don't want to like drive all the way to LA every time I want to buy like Japanese ingredients for things. So grateful. There's a local bakery that makes Japanese milk bread, which if you've never had Japanese milk bread, it is worth the investment. It's probably a couple extra dollars. You have to buy it at a specialty bakery because they don't really have it like your local grocery store. But the texture and the taste of milk bread it's damn good. I'm gonna leave it at that. So my mom, you know, these days you find like places that make teriyaki chicken sandwiches or teriyaki beef sandwiches like all the time, but we never really heard of that when we were kids, and we certainly didn't hear about it in Japan. So in my head, my mom's the first person in Japan that made teriyaki beef sandwiches, which is probably not true, but that's what I'm gonna believe. So it's a thicker loaf. It just smells so good, and it's so soft. Okay, so put that over there. And because it's a sandwich that's kind of, you know, you have it for lunch the next day, it doesn't, again, it's room temperature, it's not meant to be eaten hot. If you microwave this, I don't know what would happen to the bread. I think it might get soggy because we're not toasting it. So I would advise, you know, like if you're gonna make this at home and you prefer like a warm sandwich, then I suggest you heat up the yakiniku beef first, and then make your sandwich. But you know, I'm an old school girl, so we're just gonna make the sandwich and then I'm just gonna eat it tomorrow for lunch. So the neat thing about this is that my mom used to make a wasabi mayo, which is available everywhere now. You know, Kewpie mayo, which is the Japanese mayo, it tastes different from any other kind of mayo that you've had because it has more eggs. So it's a very eggy. So even before you know, like anything else, if you just tasted this by itself, it probably tastes kind of similar to the filling in a deviled egg. Like it's that compared to like your Kraft mayo or your Miracle Whip or anything like that. Now, wasabi mayo, your mayo is up to you. If you like using Japanese Kewpie mayo, use that. If you like Miracle Whip, use that. It's tangy, you know. There's certain foods that I actually enjoy Miracle Whip with, you know. A good old school 1950s bologna and Kraft sliced cheese sandwich on Wonder Bread, I'm probably gonna use Miracle Whip because this won't make it taste like it's supposed to. So, but in my case, for this sandwich, we're gonna use Kewpie mayo and wasabi. I like using the wasabi from the Japanese market. The SMB is a brand that's been around forever. It's like our version of Kraft. I couldn't tell you what SMB stands for, but it's SMB. And I'm using the real wasabi, which is hon wasabi. This, let's see, that little character on top means that it's authentic, as opposed to a lot of the American wasabis, which is really just horseradish and food coloring. So again, this is like flavoring is up to you. If you want a lot of wasabi flavor, then you add a lot of wasabi. If you want just a mild one, then you know what I'm getting at. I think that because we are, you know, the white side of my family is Midwestern, I think that my mom started with Miracle Whip with us as kids because as kids we tend to like things with a little bit of sweeter flavor, little bit of a sweeter flavor, and then switched over to Kewpie mayo as we got older. And we're a military family, so we were able to get a lot of the American groceries. Kind of, it's like the opposite of here, where like I have a hard time finding all the Japanese ingredients that I like. In Japan, the only way that we were able to get a lot of the American ingredients was to go on base. So that's how I was able to get my hands on Miracle Whip as a kid. So, wasabi mayo goes on the milk bread. I like putting it on both sides. Don't forget to go to the edge. But I tend not to go I don't tend to go crazy with the mayo. because the milk bread is so good by itself, and then that teriyaki kind of bulgogi type beef is amazing just by itself too. So okay, so once that's on, beef goes on. Now the way my mom made it, she never added like lettuce or anything else to this. It was really just teriyaki beef, wasabi mayo, and bread, milk bread. But I think that you could probably add like shredded cabbage or a big like red lettuce leaf, or you can do something like sliced cucumbers if you like that crunch, but you don't really like lettuces. Or you leave it like this and then you just have a side salad, right? If you're a salad guy, get your fiber. That's all I'm saying. Other side goes on. Push it down just a little bit. Now, I don't care if the crust is on it, but you know, the traditional Japanese style is to cut off all the crust. That's extra for snacking on. And then Japanese sandwiches have a tendency to be more rectangular rather than triangular. So I'm just gonna cut this in half. And then, look at that amazingness. Okay, so I would wrap this in plastic wrap and then put it in a brown paper bag, and that would be my lunch tomorrow. I'm gonna go and finish the rest of my dinner, and I hope you enjoyed my little walk down memory lane with my mom's favorite cooking. I'll see you guys later.